Hey everyone, today's update might catch you off guard because it quietly changes something that affects almost every single day of your life: what you eat. The federal government has just released a brand new food pyramid, and it's not the one most of us grew up with. This isn't a small adjustment or a cosmetic redesign. This is a complete rethink of what officials now say Americans should be putting on their plates. And here's why this matters more than people realize. These guidelines don't just sit on a government website. They influence school lunches, hospital meals, military food, nutrition advice from doctors, and even food assistance programs. So when this pyramid changes, the ripple effects reach millions of households. What's surprising is not just what's included, it's what's been moved, reduced, or quietly pushed aside. For years, the message was clear. Base your meals on carbohydrates: bread, cereal, rice, pasta. Fat was treated like the enemy. Protein was important, but not the focus. And sugar? Well, it was often hidden behind low-fat labels and colourful packaging. That entire approach is now being challenged. The government has brought back the food pyramid, but this time it's flipped upside down. Foods that used to sit at the wide base are now pushed into the smallest section, and foods that were once limited, questioned, or even discouraged are suddenly front and centre. The core message behind the new guidance is simple but powerful: eat real food. And when officials say real food, they mean foods you can recognise without reading a chemistry textbook: meat, fish, eggs, dairy, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, natural fats. Foods that come from actual sources, not labs or long ingredient lists. Ultra-processed products, powders, artificial snacks, and heavily engineered meals are no longer being treated as harmless conveniences. They are being directly linked to the rise in chronic disease across the country. According to the administration behind this change, decades of nutrition advice simply didn't deliver the results people were promised. Obesity rates continued to climb, type 2 diabetes became widespread, heart disease remained one of the leading causes of death, and healthcare costs exploded at the same time Americans were told to eat low-fat, high-carb diets. The argument being made now is straightforward. If the advice didn't work, it was time to question the foundation. One of the biggest shifts in the new pyramid is protein. Protein is no longer treated as a supporting player. It's now a core focus of daily eating. The recommended intake is noticeably higher than what many people were taught growing up. And this isn't about bodybuilding or extreme diets. Protein plays a key role in everyday health. It helps maintain muscle, it supports strength and mobility, it keeps you feeling full longer, and it helps stabilize blood sugar levels throughout the day. This matters even more as people get older. Research consistently shows that inadequate protein intake in adults, especially seniors, is linked to muscle loss, weakness, and reduced independence over time. Higher protein doesn't mean excess. It means intention, choosing meals that actually support your body instead of leaving you hungry an hour later. Alongside protein comes another major reversal: fat. For decades, fat was framed as something to fear. Low-fat products filled grocery shelves. Whole milk was replaced with skim. Butter was swapped for margarine. Eggs were questioned. Oils were avoided. The new guidelines openly acknowledge that this fear went too far. Healthy fats are now encouraged, particularly when they come from whole food sources: olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, eggs, full-fat dairy. Even traditional animal fats are mentioned as acceptable options within a balanced diet. That doesn't mean unlimited portions or ignoring calories. Saturated fat still has recommended limits. Balance still matters. But fat is no longer treated as the automatic villain it once was. The emphasis now is on quality over labels. Low fat doesn't automatically mean healthy, and higher fat doesn't automatically mean harmful. Context matters. Another area where the guidelines draw a firm line is added sugar. The new guidance states clearly that there is no recommended amount of added sugar as part of a healthy diet. That's a much stronger position than in the past. For children, the message is even stricter. Parents are encouraged to avoid added sugars altogether when possible. This reflects growing concern about how early sugar exposure affects long-term health. Sugar isn't just showing up in desserts, it's hidden in cereals, drinks, snacks, sauces, and foods marketed as healthy. The new pyramid treats added sugar as something to actively limit, not manage. And closely tied to sugar is the issue of highly processed foods. These are foods designed to be easy, cheap, and extremely palatable. Chips, cookies, sugary drinks, frozen meals with long ingredient lists. They're convenient, but the evidence linking them to chronic disease is now overwhelming. The new guidelines don't soften this message. They directly state that diets heavy in ultra-processed foods are associated with poorer health outcomes over time. What makes this complicated is access. Processed foods often dominate lower-income neighborhoods because they're affordable and widely available. That's why these guidelines go beyond personal choice. They affect policies, programs, and institutional food systems. Supporters believe this shift could improve long-term health and reduce costs tied to diabetes and heart disease. Critics worry about whether schools and assistance programs can realistically provide fresh, whole foods with limited budgets and staffing. That debate is ongoing. The government is signalling a major change in how it views nutrition. Less focus on engineered convenience, more focus on foods that actually nourish the body. Now let's talk about the part of the new food pyramid that surprised a lot of people the most: grains. For decades, grains were treated as the foundation of a healthy diet. Bread at breakfast, sandwiches at lunch, pasta or rice at dinner. The old pyramid told people that carbohydrates should make up the largest portion of their daily calories. That idea is no longer front and center. In the new pyramid, grains haven't disappeared, but they've been scaled back significantly. They now occupy a much smaller section, and there's a clear distinction being made between whole grains and refined grains. Whole grains, things like oats, brown rice, and whole wheat, are still included. But refined grains like white bread, sugary cereals, and processed baked goods are no longer encouraged as staples. This is an important shift because it challenges the long-standing belief that everyone needs a large base of carbohydrates at every meal to function properly. For many people, especially those dealing with blood sugar issues, insulin resistance, or energy crashes, this change may actually feel like relief. Fewer refined carbs can mean steadier energy, fewer spikes and crashes, and better appetite control throughout the day. And this doesn't mean carbs are bad, it means context matters. The new guidance encourages people to build meals around protein, vegetables, healthy fats, and then add carbohydrates intentionally, not automatically. Another major focus of the updated pyramid is portion awareness. Can be beneficial. One of the problems it's also easy to nutrition advice is that it focused heavily on food categories, but small amounts not go enough on how much people the new message isn't about restriction. Even real, it's about whole paying foods attention. Can become a problem. Eating real food doesn't mean eating without healthy limits. Fats. It means choosing foods that support your body and being mindful of how much you need, not how much is available. This is especially important for adults as they age. As metabolism naturally slows, portion sizes that once felt fine may no longer match the body's needs. The updated pyramid quietly acknowledges this by emphasizing nutrient density over volume. That brings us to one of the most important groups affected by this shift: older adults. Higher protein intake, fewer refined carbohydrates, and adequate healthy fats are all linked to better outcomes for aging populations. These include improved muscle maintenance, better balance, reduced risk of falls, and more stable energy levels. Loss of muscle is one of the biggest threats to independence later in life. And muscle loss isn't just about strength. It affects mobility, metabolism, and even immune function. By putting protein back at the center of the plate, the new pyramid is addressing a problem that many people don't think about until it's already happening. Another key theme in the new guidance is simplicity. For years, nutrition advice became increasingly complicated. Calories, macros, percentages, labels, superfoods, trends. Many people felt overwhelmed and eventually gave up trying to do it right. The updated pyramid moves away from that complexity and returns to basics. Foods that look like food. Ingredients you recognize. Meals you can actually cook at home. This simplicity matters because nutrition advice only works if people can follow it consistently. Now, let's talk about who this shift helps the most. First, people struggling with weight management. Diets heavy in refined carbs and added sugars make it easier to overeat without feeling satisfied. A higher protein, whole food approach often leads to natural appetite control without constant willpower. Second, people managing blood sugar. Reducing refined carbohydrates and added sugars can significantly improve glucose stability for many individuals. Third, seniors and retirees. Maintaining muscle, strength, and energy becomes more important than chasing low-calorie numbers. Quality nutrition supports independence. Fourth, families with children. Lower sugar intake and less reliance on ultra-processed snacks can shape healthier habits early in life. But it's also important to address the criticism. Some experts have raised concerns about how these guidelines were developed. They argue that the advisory process involved a smaller group of voices and moved quickly. Others worry about implementation, especially in schools, hospitals, and assistance programs that already operate under tight budgets. Fresh, whole foods require storage, preparation, and trained staff. That's not easy in every setting. Supporters respond by pointing out that the long-term costs of poor nutrition, diabetes care, heart disease treatment, mobility loss, far exceed the short-term savings of cheap processed food. This debate highlights a larger issue. Nutrition policy isn't just about food. It's about healthcare, economics, and quality of life. Another challenge is trust. Many people feel burned by changing nutrition advice. One decade fat is bad. The next decade sugar is bad. Then carbs are questioned. It can feel like everything keeps changing. The key difference with the new pyramid is that it's less about chasing nutrients and more about returning to fundamentals. Eat foods that support your body. Limit foods designed to override hunger signals. Balance matters more than extremes. And that's where the guidance becomes practical. You don't need to overhaul your entire diet overnight. Small changes add up. Adding protein to breakfast instead of starting the day with sugar, choosing water or unsweetened drinks more often, cooking one extra meal at home each week, reading ingredient lists instead of front-of-package claims. These steps don't require perfection, they require awareness. The biggest takeaway from this updated food pyramid is not fear, it's clarity. You don't need to follow trends. You don't need to eliminate entire food groups. You don't need to eat perfectly. You just need to be more intentional. The focus is back where it belongs, on real food, balanced meals, and long-term health instead of short-term convenience. And whether you fully agree with the new pyramid or not, it sends a clear signal. The way we've been eating as a nation hasn't worked, and it's time to rethink the foundation.